Well, hi everybody. Welcome back to Pushing the Limits with Lisa Tamati. Today I have Brodie Sharpe with me. Brodie is in Australia and he is a physiotherapist with a bent for running. That's the way of putting it, eh, Brodie?
Yeah.
And Brodie has been already a guest on the show, and we don't have many repeat guests on the show, but Brodie's knowledge is just insane. He has really some specialised areas that he's working in and I wanted to share with you guys his latest insights. And also, he's got a brand new podcast himself, so he's going to tell you a little bit about that. But Brodie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for having me. And congratulations with the new book as well.
Oh, thanks, mate. It's nearly killed me, but it's nearly another 2 weeks and I can at least get this baby out. But it's been a rough road. Now, Brodie, just because if people haven't heard your first interview that we did, can you give them a quick sort of synopsis of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Melbourne, Australia, and I've been a physiotherapist for about 7 years. I'm just going to my 8th year now. And it was about 2 years into my physio career that I started running and becoming a runner, and just realized as soon as I started running and went through my own running injuries myself, that I just became a lot more passionate with seeing runners. And as soon as a runner would come in the door, I'd have this like heightened passion and just want to talk about all things running, or like, do you measure your cadence? What are you training for? What shoes are you wearing? All that sort of thing. And yeah, I just was really passionate about getting them back onto the track and seeing them achieve their running goals and just overcoming their injuries, getting back to whatever goals they have, and sort of found a need and wanted to just address that more. I wanted to see more runners. I wanted to see more people getting back to their running goals. And so started a couple of things. I started the Everyday Running Legends podcast, which was like a passion project of mine, just trying to inspire a lot of people. And now I've just transitioned to a bit more on the business side of things, starting my new company. It's called the Breakthrough Running Clinic, and I am offering online physio for runners. And that has taken me into the last couple of months starting another podcast called the Run Smarter podcast.
Wow. That's a whole lot for to be doing all at once, because I know what it's like to start a new company, and online especially.
Yeah.
So congratulations on that. And, you know, the last time we did speak, gosh, it must be a year and a half or something like that ago.
Yeah.
You were thinking about this. So it's really nice to see that you've actually taken the leap and starting to transition out onto your own and into your own empire. And, you know, and you're adding all the time to your knowledge base. And that's what I really love about you, is that you're constantly on the search for the next and the, you know, constant learning. So we've got a lot to talk about today. So Brodie, I wanted to start, and yeah, everybody go and check out the Run Smarter podcast. So make sure you do subscribe to that, and, you know, take advantage of meeting these cool people via this podcast, and get more knowledge from Brodie. But Brodie, let's talk about now going into pain. And what is pain? And we've all experienced it. None of us like it. Well, most of us don't. There's a few masochists around. But what is brain, and why is the brain, what is pain, and what does the brain have to do with it? And why is it so important to be looking at the deeper levels of pain and what's going on?
Yeah, cool. I should start with, like, I'm no expert on the actual pain science, but I have delved into a lot of the books and a lot of the research, and I've put together a little bit of a mini series on my new podcast about this. It's the pain science, explaining the pain science.
Yeah.
And it's hard for people to kind of wrap their mind around, because a lot of people get really defensive when a health professional or a doctor will talk to someone about their chronic pain and say it's all in your head. And I've had clients in my clinic come in with years and years of low back pain or knee pain, and they sit down, they're a bit frustrated, and they say, the doctor says it's all in my head, but it's not all in my head. I can feel it. And they kind of associate it all being in their head like they're making it up.
Yeah.
But that's not the case at all.
No.
And we've known for a long time now that 100% of the pain that you experience is from your brain. That's where the science lies. And saying it's all in your head is kind of poor
Poor
while it can be
communication.
misinterpreted really quickly. And all they're trying to say is it's from your brain, and it's how your brain perceives a threat. And that's when all the pain signals arise. Like you could have, as if you could have someone who has certain beliefs that increases a threat, or certain beliefs that decreases that threat, and the pain signals generated signify that. And a couple of examples I use on my podcast is um, like you hear a lot of stories of people of not knowing, like that they've been mugged, and the adrenaline's pumping and they don't really know they've actually been stabbed in the back,
Yep.
or it's just like all gone too quickly, they don't realize, and they have no idea. But it's not until later on when they realize that's when the pain starts. And there's also it could go the other way, where someone has some really, really minor knee pain, and the level of damage is really, really low, but the brain starts to think, oh, I had knee pain in the past. Oh, my mum had knee pain and she was limping for 3 years and she was on crutches for 2 months. And what about if I can never run again? I've got this marathon in 2 weeks. What about if I can never run again? And all these messages that you send yourself feeds that brain, and the brain starts to assess the level of threat and will produce that adequate level of pain, depending on what,
Yeah.
like how necessary, what the threat is. Yeah.
So to paraphrase that, it's reinforcing. So yes, there's a small tissue damage, but it's reinforcing the fact when you focus in on it in a negative way with negative stress towards that event, and sometimes it can be blown out of full proportion. And I love the analogy with you've been stabbed in the back, but you don't feel it because you're so adrenalized. So that's actually a neurotransmitter actually dampening down the pain responses. So just a question that pops to mind there. Like I know, like when I've had horrendous blisters, for example, right? And you'd stop for a break and then you get back out there and the pain is insane for the first 10 minutes and then it goes. Like it's a really bizarre sort of, I don't know if people have had that experience where every time you stop and have a break and then restart, that's when you notice the blisters 100 times more, it's more extreme. And then after 10 minutes or so, it's like the endorphins or something kicks back in and the pain level becomes manageable. So what's going on in that sort of a case? Do you know what's happening there?
I could try and answer it the best I can.
Yeah.
The first concept I talk about in the podcast is context. What sort of context do you give the scenario? And I played a clip on the podcast. This guy called Lorimer Mosley, he's the author of this Explain Pain book, and he uses the example of he's walking in the bush and he trips over a twig and scratches his leg. Nothing really happens. He's like, oh, it's just, you used to scratch your legs all the time. You used to scratch your legs on twigs when you were a kid. This is no big deal. And turns out he was bitten by a snake and he was in hospital and is a life-threatening scenario. But he didn't experience any pain until he realized he was bitten by the snake. A couple of years later, he's on that same track and he finds that he clips his foot on something and is in extreme pain because the brain thinks, hang on, you were here years ago and you almost died. Level of threat goes up. And so he's in extreme levels of pain, but then realized it was only a twig. And so it's what the brain tends to interpret. So going back to your blister question, as you can start running, the brain can say, oh, look, I'm running and I'm not dying. I'm okay. There's no real threat. Yes, it hurts, but I'm not limping. I'm still continuing. Like it's not, the level of threat isn't as bad as like another injury per se. And so I guess you could say the level of threat starts to decrease, and then the brain doesn't really see it as much of a priority.
I wonder if there's some neurotransmitters involved here, like endorphins and stuff or serotonin or something that actually dampens down the pain response, or whether it is because another example I'll give, I was when I ran through New Zealand and we're doing 2,250 Ks in 42 days, it turned out. And at the beginning, in the first 2 weeks, it was just getting worse and worse. And like the pain was horrific and my body was falling to pieces and the immune system was going up the wops and all the rest. And it got to a point where I just had absolute rock bottom and I didn't think I could continue, but I did continue. When I did continue, I actually went back up the other side. I actually got stronger and stronger. And it was almost like the body's way of going, stop, you're over, you're absolutely, you're going to kill us, so I'm going to throw everything at you to stop. And then you didn't stop, so it went like, oh shit, we better get on with it, and we better start dealing with it. And you actually got better and stronger. And I've heard that phenomenon from other ultra runners who've done thousands of kilometer races, that's what happens. It actually goes really down to the rock bottom, and then if you don't stop, it comes back up. And you'll see it even in ultra marathons where you think you're at the end of your tether, and then you keep pushing on somehow, slowly, groveling your way forward, and then all of a sudden you're back, and you don't know why or how, and that's not just a pain thing, but that's more of an energy thing as well. But it is bizarre how the body, like when it perceives a threat. So a third example, and I promise I'll stop giving examples, but the third example is almost in every major race that I've done where it's been a big, scary, horrifying, threatening race, if you like, 200K or something like that. The days ahead of the race, it seemed to always end up with either an injury, a cold, or something happens, and you end up not being in good shape. And I think it's the body's knowing this battle is coming, and it's trying to stop you from actually standing on the start line, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And when you do anyway, it tends to be a non-event. It's like the body is faking it to try and stop you actually taking on this, because it sees it as a threat and knows a threat is coming.
Yeah. I think when I was talking about the pain science side of things, I tended to stay, I guess I didn't cover the endorphin side, like in the heat of the moment type of pain,
Yes.
because that's definitely a science that is proven and shown that if you have these endorphins, they can help get you through these like really intense moments. Endurance athletes, they just have another mindset that is far beyond what anyone else can experience. But it's funny that you have that story, because if it's a really long endurance race and you're doing months, weeks, or like days and days of these intense exercise, your body's going to think, we're not ready for this. Let's start giving out signals for the body to slow down, because this is a threat. But
Right.
as soon as you go through that dip and you sort of see the other side, the body has gone through its shock, and it's almost like you're convincing it, we can do this. Let's go do this. And there's definitely these peaks and troughs, and those troughs usually come at like the halfway point where you're like, I just don't know if I can do this. But then when your mind is so strong and you're like, no, I don't care how bad we're feeling, we're doing this, the body's like, okay, let's do it. And so we'll start to prioritize other things rather than pain, and say, okay, let's do what we can to get through this.
Yes, I really believe that. So, I mean, this is transgressing from just purely a pain thing, but also, and that whole mindset thing. And when you go, and same with the story with my mum, when you go all in, and when you have an open mind to their possibilities of therapies outside of what, you were told was possible. And this is the issue that I have with doctors taking away people's hope, or giving people terminal prognosis. You got terminal cancer and you're going to die in 3 months. Well, you've just bloody signed a death warrant, basically.
Yeah.
Because you've set that seed in the brain, and that becomes a reality. Like, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy often. And there have been examples of this where people have, subsequently died within the time frame they've done the autopsy, and there's no cancer. There's a misdiagnosis or something. And people go, well, why did they die in that time frame? Because you've set your mind onto something, and whatever you believe. And so one of the things with this book is that I want people to understand that even when the doctors is telling you there is no way, you have to, if you want a chance at success, you have to go all in and ignore the naysayers completely, whether they have a scientific point or not, whether they're actually correct or not. If you want a chance at beating the odds, then you have to go in with an attitude of, nah, not listening to that, absolutely rejecting that. I'm doing it my way and this is the way we're going. Because only then do you have a tiny chance of actually making it. That's not to say you will make it, but that is to say that you have a chance, because your mind is at least going on that route, and then you will see things, you will learn things, you will find things that you wouldn't otherwise find. And one of the problems that I've because I work now with a lot of people with brain injuries or dementia or Alzheimer's or things that are facing pretty major diagnoses. And the problem that I have with a lot of people is they don't buy in to what I'm saying 100%. And they don't have an open mind, and they have the I'll try it attitude. And that I try it attitude is never ever going to get you there. Not with something as major as what when you're dealing with a massive running event or a massive health event. You have to be, I'm going all in and my mind's open and I'm taking all this information in and I'm going to process it and I'm going to actually be proactive in it. If you go in, with a half-hearted attitude towards it, you don't have a show,
Because we are talking about beliefs as well. And that's
yes.
like whatever you believe is what the brain is going to perceive. And so if you go in half-heartedly, that's not shifting your belief at all. It's, I'll still believe my old thing,
Yes.
but give it this one a try. It's not shifting any of that belief.
Yeah, and you won't be successful. And I've seen this time and time and again with people, and I can almost predict who are the ones that are going to have at least some level of success because they're all in. If you tell me to jump and put a carrot up my nose, I'll do it because they are all in on the process. And it's not about even what therapies are you doing or what are you achieving. It's the mindset first to go in with that approach into any challenge that you're facing. And pain, and the hard thing with pain is that it's so intense, and so immediate. I've been in situations, where I've had incredibly bad pain with a few of the health issues that I've dealt with, without going into the details, where I was, trying to mobilize all my mental power to control the pain and was still unable to, had to get the morphine shot or whatever for it to go. But there must be a way to get in there, like when you've got an acute pain happening and you're trying to breathe through it and you're trying to, you see the ladies and giving birth and they're told to just breathe and relax. And it sounds so ridiculous, but the more you fight it, the worse it actually is. And that's what they're trying to portray. But it isn't as easy as just, oh, well, I'll take myself off to a happy place and it'll go away. I wish it was that easy, but it isn't quite that easy with really intense pains at least. So what else can you tell us about the pain? So fear plays a part, your previous experience plays a part.
Yeah.
The context that you associate around this pain
Absolutely
all play a major, that Laura Mosley was it?
hard to say, I know.
Yeah, I saw his TED talk on that, and actually I sent it to my brother who was dealing with some back injury issues. And I think that was really gold. He thought the twig
sums it up really well.
Yeah, and he thought the snake was the twig. So it is a really good thing. Okay, so anything else you want to add on to the pain conversation?
Yes. So if we're talking about beliefs, and if someone does have a running injury, I ask people to have a good self-reflection of what beliefs you've held on to, because I see a lot of injured runners, and especially those ones who have multiple running injuries or a really chronic running injury, they have certain beliefs. They'll say, my health professional in the past has said that I have one leg longer than the other and my glute on the left side doesn't fire right and my hips go out of line if I run 10 Ks, and I just need to readjust that and start firing up my glutes again. I don't know how to activate my glutes, but they're just not working right now, and my feet collapse and all this sort of stuff. And it's this extremely disempowering belief that they have. And how are they meant to thrive if they keep feeding their brain with these beliefs? As soon as they go for a run, the brain's going to be like, but wait, you have a
Yeah,
one leg longer than the other, and
possible.
those messages will start feeding the body, and these will start arising. It's, like I said, it's really, really disempowering. And if you play yourself victim to those beliefs, you're just going to continuously have these injuries. And it's not until you shift your focus and all those things I mentioned, these leg length discrepancies, and hips out of line, there's no like science around that. If you have a 1 centimeter leg length discrepancy, it's not going to affect your biomechanics or what's firing or anything. There is science once you get beyond 20 mil leg length discrepancy, that's when it can slowly start to
Yeah,
change your biomechanics. But it's extremely rare that someone has that level of discrepancy. It's like usually a couple of mil here and there. And so really what those beliefs you give yourself, have some self-reflection and see if the beliefs you have, if they're really, really serving you, or if
yeah.
they're heading in the other direction.
Definitely, and I can't agree with you more. And things like, I'm an asthmatic, therefore I can't run. The amount of times that I've heard that, and it's like, hang on a second, I'm an asthmatic. I know lots of other asthmatics who run, and
Mm-hmm.
we, like as a child, was severe asthmatic. When you program that means I cannot do this, that's when you're going to limit yourself into your potential. And on the other extreme, I've seen people with crazy injuries doing crazy things like person with one leg running across Death Valley, or a blind person running across the Sahara in Morocco, or a person with multiple sclerosis going across the desert on crutches because they couldn't run anymore. Like, it is up to you as to what you believe and how you think that can be dealt with. And one of the areas of study that we do in our company called epigenetic testing, and it looks at the different phenotypes and health types of people. And there are certain people, and within the differences of humankind, there's like there's 6 different health types, and these are a broad overview. And there are a couple that have a heightened sensitivity to neural pain and sensitivity to the environmental stimulus. So these are what they call people who are sensors, which are usually very, a lot of the development when they're an embryo went into their nervous system development. So they're very brain and nervous system focused, and they're very sensitive to the environment, and they feel pain more intensely. They are reactive more to their environment. They're usually very slim, ectomorph body types, and they're usually very much in their brain, very cognitive, like very big thinkers. And they have a tendency more to feel the pain than, say, someone who is like an activator, which is another of the types, and they're the short, muscular body types, very good coordination, very athletic, and their dominant hormone is adrenaline, and the adrenaline means that they can withstand more pain because they have more adrenaline going through the system. Now, it has other disadvantages by having so much adrenaline, but they're not as sensitive to the pain, or they don't experience it as intensely as someone of a sensor makeup, who's more it's a little bit hard to explain, but the sensory overload very quickly.
Yeah, interesting.
So I think there's some genetic reasons why some people feel it more than other people as well. And again, this comes down to the whole chemical makeup and the dominant hormones and the dominant neurotransmitters that we have running through our body as to how much we will experience pain and other areas as well. So really, really fascinating topic, eh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing on the injury side, like, again, working with someone who has a back injury, and they definitely have a mechanical back injury. There's a couple of discs that are bulging and so on. But I'm convinced that their pain is not only from the back injury, because they've had that for years, but it's suddenly intensified. And I think there's a lot to do with other health issues going on, and that's exacerbating it. Things like the gut health is affecting the pain levels in the body and the inflammation in the body. They're put on weight a little bit around the middle, which is pulling their back in a different way. they are, in my opinion, probably dehydrated and not doing enough aerobic exercise, so they're stagnant and their periphery circulation is stagnant. All of these things contribute to the back pain. And so you can't just go and take an anti-inflammatory and think, you'll be right, or even have surgery and think you'll be all right, because you're not addressing the system. And you can have a tissue-related mechanical reason that you have an injury, but it's not the only part of the equation that you need to be addressing. I mean, I've got 4 discs that are completely buggered. There's nothing in between my discs, and yet I don't have any pain but I spent a lot of time working on things like hydration, my immune system, my gut health, my core strength, and all of these aspects to it, and not focusing just on, I've got to go and get the surgery to fuse the back, which was what was recommended. And I now don't have any, touch wood, pain, which I used to have on an absolute, debilitating level.
I'll quickly add, like when we're talking about mechanical pain and lower back and discs and things like that, we need to be really careful with how we explain these to patients and how people interpret their scan findings. And if you're beyond 40 years old and into 50s, 60s, there's going to be degeneration, there's going to be disc bulges, there's going to be all these findings, which can be asymptomatic. And if you scan 100 healthy people with no pain whatsoever, and you scan their backs up to, well, depending on the age, let's say if they're above 50, up to 80% of them are going to have some disc bulges, they're going to have some degeneration, they're going to show some findings, and they're all healthy, they're showing no pain. So if someone with back pain comes in and they're like, I want to get a scan, and they show these disc bulges, okay, is this related to their pain? Who knows? Because they're you've got all these studies of all these healthy people that have these findings. How can we correlate the two? There are very, very low percentage people that will have like a really significant disc protrusion that's obstructing one of the nerves or impinging one of the nerves, which usually causes like weakness and like permanent numbness down the legs. That's a very serious condition. But when I have someone come into my clinic and they've had years of back pain, they're like, look at all these scans. They like shove these results into my face and they're like, look at this level, this level, this level. And you have to really peg them back a little bit and show them, okay, you need to give them a little bit of reassurance as well, because they're panicking and it doesn't really serve them with their rehabilitation. So you need to be really careful with how you deal with these sort of clients.
Yes, and then actually, doing proactive things before you grow up to surgery, like let's try strengthening the core. Let's try sorting your gut bacteria out. Let's try reducing the inflammation load in your body through other means, cutting out the bad stuff and doing more aerobic exercise and doing these things, and more sleep, and, all of these basic things that a lot of people neglect because they want the more complicated answer. They want the surgery, the pill, the whatever that's going to make it just magically go away, instead of taking a systems approach. And in everything that we do, we're always looking at the whole system as best as we can with our knowledge, It's understanding what could be possibly contributing it before we go and get put under the knife, which is a drastic thing for anybody to do. So, like, it's worth, in my opinion, trying everything else before we try that route,
Agreed.
And if I hadn't done what I'd done, I wouldn't be speaking from experience. But it was either get 4 discs fused, which would be I'd never be as mobile again. I'd probably never be able to do a lot of things if I'd done that. And now just spending a huge amount of time in the core. There's a lot of exercise and work that goes into keeping my core and my back and all that, the hip and all of these areas strong, but I'm pain-free. And I know this is only one anecdotal example of this, but it's not an isolated case. I'm damn sure of it. Okay, so now let's leave the pain conversation. I read one of your blogs on Red S. Can you explain that and what the heck you mean by that?
Yeah, relative energy deficiency in sport is a recognized condition. It used to be the female triad, uh, which I'll explain in a second, but now it's applied to males also because they see this. And it's a condition where you have like your body, the best I can explain it is like your body has a certain amount of energy that it can dissipate when you exercise. And if you need to replace that energy with things like nutrition, like a proper diet, if you really exceed the output, your energy output, and your input doesn't meet that level, your body is going to start producing, I guess you could call it output energy, by extracting minerals from your muscles, from your bones, and just they have to get the energy from somewhere. It can't be just created out of thin air.
Wow.
And so if you're starting to do more and more work, if you're starting to really push yourself and get into ultras and all that sort of stuff, and you're not feeding yourself the right energy, then you're going to get into this energy deficit. And so the energy deficit, if it's over a longer period of time, it can take enough minerals out of the bone and start causing things like stress fractures. It can redirect the energy from, say, your internal organs, and you can start having gut issues and all these sort of things. And it can just be a really downward spiral into a lot of injuries, a lot of stress, a lot of chronic issues, and it can get really, really dangerous and can start to lead to a lot of real health complications. And so it used to be very common in females who were in adolescence, who were very like had a lot of body image issues and was like under a lot of pressure to perform as well. And so they would really work hard, but also not feed themselves enough because they wanted to have a better image of themselves. And if they were told they need to lose a few kilos or whatever have you, so they're working hard on the track and they're also not feeding their body, and they would start having like an altered menstrual cycle, or because their body is redirecting preferences away from the internal organs, and they start having gut issues because we're redirecting that. We need to prioritize the energy output, like the running, and the body's always going to give your energy to the physical activity that you're giving itself, because if you think evolutionary, you need to run away from a predator. That is the highest priority that the body's going to give, is the physical output. And so then the internal guts and the minerals from all the other stuff, that is gathering all those resources and putting it into that energy output, and can lead to really, really serious consequences.
Wow. So it's just a type of overtraining syndrome, or a type of adrenal burnout would also play into this. So I'm full of anecdotes today. As a young girl, I was a gymnast, and of course we were told we had to lose weight all the time because we had to be tiny, 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 and I was way too heavy. And that led to a whole lot of complications. And that's a very common thing with young pubescent girls, especially when they, their body shape's changing as well. So their whole, self-image is changing, and then you're told you're fat all the time. It's brilliant. Don't send your girls to gymnastics, is all I can say, or ballet, unless they're really, really tiny and don't have an issue with this. And then looking at even things like I'm studying DNA at the moment, and looking at the hormone cascade and which path your body takes. So if you're an androdominant female, a female who produces quickly from your progesterone into your testosterone, but very slowly into estrogens, then you're very likely, if you overtrain, you're very likely to lose your menstrual cycle, which is a very big red flag if anybody is experiencing that. It's not something to go, oh, well, that's just great, I don't have a period every month. No, this is a serious health event. You need to be looking at why that's happening. So if you're androdominant, then usually you have less smaller breasts, less hip flare, and you're very likely to lose your cycle very quickly. So you can go into overtraining quite quickly. And if you're estrodominant, then it depends on which way you're processing the estrogens, and that's another conversation. But what is really important to note here is that you are running the risk, when you overtrain, you're not actually improving when you're actually training to the optimum levels. So when you overtrain, all that hard work that you're putting into it is then being wasted because you're not recovering and not giving it the nutrients. And when, like you said, when you're under stress, and your body will prioritize the physical energy because of the fight or flight syndrome. So then you're producing your cortisol and your adrenaline constantly, which a lot of us are dealing with, not only athletes, but just with the lifestyle that we have, constant demands from computers and emails and bosses and so on, and bills. So we're in this constant state of fight or flight. And that takes energy away from your immune system, takes energy away from, excuse me, mum's ringing, energy away from your immune system, from your ability to fight diseases and infections, your hormonal cycle, everything, your digestive processes, your recovery processes are all in deficit. And this is why optimizing your nutrition on top of your training is really important, and prioritizing the right amount of recovery. And this is very difficult territory for ultramarathoners, especially if you have the mentality, I'm tough, I can handle it, I can just push through and push through and push through. And that can be really problematic, you know, because it's a problem that I've dealt with, definitely, because you on the one side, you want to be tough and push through, and you can, and that has great benefits. But on the other side, you're actually doing yourself health disservice, and you can be fit but unhealthy, which is a really, important point.
Yeah, you might also be interested. I've got a podcast episode on this interwoven relationship between sleep and stress and recovery, and I do mention this cortisol that gets released through the body and the importance of that. And it's this really interwoven relationship that all those concepts have, and the impact it has on your running and your injury risk and performance. It's a really interesting concept that not a lot of people would take into consideration. Like you were saying, people just care about output. They just care about running. If I run faster, if I run further, if I do it more frequently, that's how I'm going to get stronger. But it's not really the case.
No, you get better, stronger, faster when you actually go and sleep better and eat properly.
Good. Yeah. To train hard, you need to sleep hard. I've been told that a couple of times, and it rings true.
Absolutely. So, we have a checklist that we get our athletes to do. And you can do this with your HRV apps as well, that measure your heart rate variability. But then you can see if you're actually going into overtraining. If you're just rating on a scale of 1 to 10, your hydration yesterday, your sleep, your stress levels, your injury levels, your mood, all of these things will give you an indication, are you heading in the wrong direction? If you're coming back with low scores and you've got a big training day today, it might be a good idea not to do that training. And that level of responsibility and not feeling guilty and understanding your body is really something that you have to learn and grow with over time. Or if you've got a great coach, you can say, your numbers aren't looking good on your HRV or whatever, you need to pull back today, I want you to have a day off. And that's scary for athletes, when you're training for some great, huge event and you've got to have a day off. And you're like, it's all going to go to custard. But I can tell you, if you start to listen and read your body better, you'll have a better performance on less training than if you're pushing it to the absolute nth degree. And you see this like with athletes in the last 3 weeks, they haven't done enough training throughout the program. And then the last 3 weeks, they're trying to cram in what they didn't do because, oh my God, the race is around the corner. And that's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
You're not going to recover enough to be able to run.
I'm glad you're talking about this, because this is the idea of the podcast. It's called the Run Smarter podcast, because you can train hard, but you actually need to be smart. And I see this all the time. Like, runners don't make the best decisions. They really, really don't. And they come into my clinic and they're injured and they tell me about their story, and you feel like you just want to slap your forehead with your hand, because they're just talking through their story. And you're like, why are you making these decisions? Like, why? It just seems it's either just their drive, their personality, and they're just like, they're a perfectionist and they want to perform and they just have to do it. Sometimes it's a bit of an addiction, but sometimes it's just lack of knowledge, and they just don't understand the consequences certain things can have, and the importance of sleep and recovery, and having rest days and having slow recovery days. And so it's all about training smarter and being a smarter runner that's going to lead you to be a better runner.
Yeah. and then that is, and this is valid for not just runners but for everybody, and learning and understanding and having that maturity, and having done everything wrong in the early years of my career, or even in the later years of my career, I know what I'm talking about. I mean, like going back to the red S syndrome, or whatever you call it. I remember doing that race in the Himalayas, a 222k race, and I came back the next week and three teeth fell out.
Wow.
That says something, doesn't it? The minerals in your body are just getting smashed to high heaven, and to lose teeth means you're up pretty up shit creek.
Wow, I've never heard of that before. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty extreme. 3 teeth in a week. It was an expensive week, I tell you. A lot of implants.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this is like I have spent an absolute fortune in my mouth. It's a mortgage in my mouth. And a lot of it is because I just overtrained for years and lost teeth.
Wow.
So, and you can imagine what that's doing then to your bones and all the other things, your cycle and everything else. So sometimes being tough and having a strong drive and having a willpower and having mental toughness and all that is great, but not at the expense of your health. And you have to sort of have a little bit of experience and wisdom and listen to these sorts of things to try to understand, when am I just being an idiot and when am I, really being sensible. And
I think it's like, when you talk about that, like, how do I know if I'm being sensible? Take a bird's eye view of your performance and your training over the last 6 months, 12 months, couple of years. Like, have you been battling injuries constantly? Have you been increasing your performance? Have you been increasing your running times? Have you, do you feel like you can jump out of bed? Do you feel like you can start the day? It's really like, I don't know if it's just a running thing. I think it's like a human thing. We really struggle to, get a mental image of what it's been like the last 12 months. We see ourselves in this little 1 week window and say I need to perform. I need to get better. I need to get better. And you need to really, really take a step back to analyze all of that thing. I know for myself, I haven't really, I say, if I start performing now, in 1 year's time, I'm going to be at this level. If I'm at 2 years time, I'm going to be at that level. And you can just see it happening. But in the last 3 years, I've got nowhere near that. So it's taking a good bird's eye view of how you're tracking. It could really be a good, helpful tool. So like you were talking about, seeing, am I making smarter decisions? Am I, ticking the goals I want? And am I making the right decisions?
And that's so true. And we are also individuals, and this harps back to the epigenetic stuff. Like, not everybody is going to respond the same to each training regime. Like, we can have an athlete that we're training, and 2 of them, they've got the same diet, they've got maybe the same age, the same sex, the same goals, and they'll get completely different results because one has a different set of genes than the other one. And understanding that level and being able to personalize it to their genes, well, that's just next level information that we can add into the conversation and change the way, the times of the day that you do it, and the foods that you are eating, and all of that sort of information. So it's exciting times that we're living in, because we never had insights into this sort of information earlier. So now, you see people making new records and things being broken all the time, and even the average person getting much more good results. But I think from this whole conversation, and we'll wrap up now, Brodie, you've given people a lot of food for thought, about the brain, the limitations in your, are you limiting yourself with your pain, the way you're experiencing it, with the way you're experiencing your belief systems and how it's influencing your injuries. Also the red S, energy
relative energy deficit. Yep.
Yeah, relative energy deficit, and overtraining, and just wisdom. Like, for a young guy, you've got a great mature outlook, and obviously your education, your ongoing education has enabled that. So once again, where can people find you, your podcast, your links? How can they reach out to you if they need help?
Okay, so on Instagram, it's Brodie.Sharpe is my handle. I've got a Facebook group called Become a Smarter Runner, and it kind of backs off, links in with the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to follow the podcast, it's called the Run Smarter Podcast, and it's available on all the platforms wherever you listen
Run
to your
smarter.
podcasts. My website is breakthroughrunning.physio, and that has my blogs, and as well as like my Facebook groups and stuff like that. I just post my blogs, I post evidence and a couple of little tips, couple of exercises here and there. So I think that's all the links I think we can
So
include.
we'll get all those links in the show notes, Brodie. So thank you very much for your time today and your expertise and your insights. And it just makes me smile because, you know, a lot of the stuff I can actually, you know, relate to, obviously, with my crazy anecdotes, but also it reinforces the learning that I have, but you have another lens and another way of bringing it across. So really, really appreciate your time today and look forward to doing some stuff with you in the future.
You're very welcome. It was a lot of fun. Good luck for the next 2 weeks of just grinding out this book.
Thanks, mate.
Ta.
Excellent. So